Hi, my name is Stephanie Ganavin, and I'll be describing my unit plan um, for the developmental unit that I used for class. This is, it starts out with a comparison to some state standards for the developmental psychology unit, and we took the state standards as a district and based our district objectives and district curriculum off of the state standards for Kansas. And as I took those district standards, that's what sort of drove my unit to begin with. And the strongest section of that is in early childhood and prenatal development. So most of my developmental unit resides in that area, although it does also go into adolescence and adulthood and aging. Looking at the end like we've been talking about in class, where's the end product that you're looking for? Most of the time I can kind of tell in class as we are having our class discussions whether students are catching on, whether they are understanding what it is that we're talking about. But sometimes I need some formal assessment to really gauge whether or not they have mastered all of the objectives. So I use a daily, it's almost like an exit ticket, but just more of a summary, a closure to the lesson. So my daily closures are either a multiple choice quiz that was over the material that we talked about that day, an open-ended question to give them some writing experience in class where they have to write and describe what it is that we discussed that day. And I also do some fun activities sometimes to change it up. Toss a ball around the room, and each time you catch the ball you have to say something that you learned about in class that day, or what it was that was the focus of that day's lesson, and talk about it in review. The kids like that they never quite know what kind of day it is, whether they're going to have a quiz, whether they're going to have to write about it, or whether we're going to be tossing a ball around. So I kind of keep them in suspense for that, keep them on their toes, and they tend to pay attention a little better. But I do try to do a daily assessment of what it is that they learned that day. Each day in my class is driven, the discussion is outlined in a PowerPoint format. I like to use PowerPoints as a visual, although we don't just read the screen, write it down, and then move on. The PowerPoints are more of a guideline as, here's the topic area, or here's the information, and then the application and analysis of that is in the class discussion. I'm an elective. I teach Psych 1. And so it is, as an elective, it is not a lot of homework heavy, it's not a lot of classwork heavy, but a lot of discussion. And the kids like that. They like that this is a class where they can talk and be heard, and they can use anecdotes from their own life to illustrate some of the topics that we discuss. And in psychology, that's every day as we talk about dealing with people and everyday sort of situations. So they do like that this seems to be a topic that they always say, Ms. Ganavin, this is something I'm going to use, or this is something I noticed yesterday. And so I hope that, in the method that I use for delivery of the information makes it more applicable to their lives. They can connect it and make those connections and see those connections. Whether the anecdotal stories come from them or they come from me, either way, that's the focus of how they learn the information. So I have different PowerPoints that I included and embedded within the PowerPoints. I also use video clips that are very short that illustrate some of the points that are being made, especially if it's a little more technical. Like if we're talking about Piaget's conservation tasks, I'm going to show a child being experimented with doing Piaget's conservation tasks. One of the major assignments that I give for this, and it's extra credit because it's kind of hard to require a high school student to do the activities with a child between the ages of 3 and 6, but most of my students do this activity. And they get a child and they do some tasks with them to see about where they lie in Piaget's. Are they a pre-operational child, or have they moved forward early? And a lot of the kids get really creative, and some of them will do Piaget tasks with a child that is like 4 or 5, and then they'll test an older child in that same family that maybe has some learning disabilities, maybe an autistic child or a Down syndrome child, and make a comparison of their cognitive skills and how they developed, and why is it that the older child, is performing at the same level or even lower as the younger child. And I just love it when they reach out and they do those experiments, and it's kind of hands-on, and they come back to the classroom and talk about how this assignment has really made them think about how children think and use their cognitive skills. And we evaluate Piaget a little bit and how he did his experiments and the pros and cons of that. In adolescence, I also they have to do some self-evaluation. Where are they on developing their morals and values, and that one's a little hard because sometimes they don't like to self-analyze or look at themselves and say, oh, this is where I am on Erickson's list, or where is my morality? What do I judge it on? And so we get into that with the adolescents a little more. And then adulthood and aging. A lot of them talk about their grandparents. I talk about my parents and some of the issues that come up with that. And I have PowerPoints for each 3 of those sections. So I break it down into 3 sections for the developmental unit: prenatal and early development, adolescence, and then adulthood and aging. And we kind of chunk it into 3 parts for the unit. My class periods vary. Sometimes they're 45 minutes, sometimes they're 90. We have usually one block day, which is the 90-minute period, and then 45 minutes for the rest of the week. And it just sort of varies. Sometimes we have 2 block days, but our calendar is kind of wacky sometimes. So on the 90-minute days, I don't lecture the whole 90 minutes. Sometimes I'll have them do an activity that has them put pen to paper and discuss an element that we've talked about, or we get into groups and discuss what we've talked about to kind of break it up halfway, because they can't sit there and listen and do a discussion for 90 minutes. But the 45 minutes are usually pretty much discussion-led class periods. The tests are multiple choice in my class. I usually try to test each objective that's listed in our district curriculum by at least 3 to 4 multiple choice questions. My multiple choice questions go beyond the knowledge level. I emphasize the application questions and evaluation questions, not so much the definition of this is this, even though there are a few in there, but not many. I try to go higher on the Bloom's taxonomy, mainly because the class discussion does. And we're not just focusing on the information on the PowerPoint of here's the definition and then leave it at that. Yes, the board says the definition, the PowerPoint says the definition, but then we take it to a deeper level. Okay, now that we know what that is, how do we apply that to human life? How do we see that in the people around us? Now that we understand that, how does that make dealing with other people easier? Or at least we understand where they're coming from and can explain some elements of that. So I do have videos I was going to attach, but I haven't quite figured out how to do that, of my students who did do, and I think on one of the assignments I attached one of the students who did do videos of working with kids with Piaget. And I love getting their videos. Some of them do posters, and they'll do pictures of them working with kids, and some will do like scrapbooks, or they'll write papers about their experiences working with children doing these activities about Piaget's cognitive level. And so I think that's their favorite part of this unit. And I like this unit a lot. It talks, it really explains how children develop, and unfortunately some of my kids in here are becoming young parents. As a Kansas City suburban school, we do have those issues of early teenage pregnancy, and I'm amazed at how much the kids don't know about prenatal development and child rearing and things like that they just didn't get good examples of, or maybe their own parenting examples were lacking. And so this is an opportunity to kind of fill in those gaps. And I've had some students tell me that they think this unit will make them a better parent. So beyond the objectives, beyond what on paper they're supposed to learn, to me that is a bigger impact that this unit has given to these kids. And I think sometimes the bigger picture can be more important than what's on paper. Although we accomplish what's on paper, but that bigger picture of making them better parents and better at understanding small kids and how people grow and how we learn. And I think that is really important. Thanks.